Maggie Carter's hands tremble as she fumbles with her phone, fingers slick with sweat. The numbers blur on the screen, but she forces herself to focus. With a shaky inhale, she presses 911. She's not breathing. The words spill from her lips, frantic and raw. Her pulse pounds in her ears. "Stay calm, Mom," the dispatcher instructs. "Check for a pulse." Maggie's hands move automatically, pressing against Lily's tiny wrist, then her neck. Nothing. The child's body is unnervingly still, her skin growing cold. "Please, hurry," Maggie whispers, voice cracking. She clutches Lily tighter, rocking slightly. The silence in the room is suffocating. A sharp bang as the front door slams open. Paramedics rush in, their practiced urgency slicing through the heavy atmosphere. One drops to his knees beside Maggie, swiftly taking Lily from her arms. "How long has she been like this?" His voice is measured, controlled. Maggie opens her mouth, but no words come out. A second paramedic frowns as he examines Lily's neck. A faint shadow, almost hidden beneath the soft curve of her jawline. A bruise. His gaze meets his colleague's. The exchange is silent but unmistakable. Rebecca, Lily's mother, stands motionless in the hallway, arms wrapped tightly around herself. Their father, Harold, leans against the kitchen doorway, whiskey glass in hand, his grip white-knuckled. He watches but remains silent. Maggie's stomach clenches. The room suddenly feels too small, too airless. No one speaks, no one moves. Rebecca's eyes, wide and glassy, dart between the paramedics and her daughter's lifeless form. Her knuckles turn white where they press into her arms. Maggie paces. She can feel Harold's gaze on her back, burning. He hasn't said a single word. Not one question, not one demand for answers. The unspoken question lingers, thick as smoke. Outside, the wail of sirens fades into the night. Inside, the tension tightens like a noose. The hospital waiting room is eerily sterile. White walls, flickering fluorescent lights, chairs too stiff to provide comfort. Maggie grips the edge of her seat, fingers digging into the fabric. Rebecca hasn't moved from the spot where she sat 20 minutes ago. Harold, slouched in the corner, swirls the remnants of his drink in its glass. Then the doctor appears. His face is grim, his posture tense. "I'm sorry," he says, his voice low, careful. "Lily didn't make it." The words shatter the silence. Maggie gasps, hands flying to her mouth as a guttural sob rips from her throat. Her entire body shakes, but no one reaches for her. Rebecca stares straight ahead, expression unreadable, as if the words haven't registered. Harold lifts his drink, tips it back, and swallows hard. His face remains blank. No one asks what really matters. No one dares to say it out loud. The hospital door swings open, and Detective Eric Monroe steps in. His sharp gaze sweeps over the grieving family. Assessing. No introductions, no apologies, just quiet observation. He lets the silence drag before finally speaking. "Who was with Lily before she stopped breathing?" The air shifts. The question lands heavy, rippling through the room like a stone thrown into still water. All eyes turn to Maggie. She stiffens, her throat bobbing. I was," she stammers. Rebecca flinches. Harold exhales sharply, setting his empty glass on the table beside him. The soft clink sounds deafening. Monroe watches them, waiting, listening. And then, with unnerving calm, he asks, "Did she fall?" Maggie's lips part, but no sound comes. The detective leans forward slightly. Or was she pushed? The coroner's report is thinner than Monroe expected, but the weight of its contents is crushing. He reads it again, then once more, allowing the words to sink deep. This wasn't a tragic accident. This was something else entirely. Monroe exhales slowly, closing the folder. His gaze lifts to Maggie, her face streaked with dried tears. She looks gutted, but something in her eyes shifts when she meets his stare. He doesn't look away. "This wasn't an accident," Monroe says finally, voice quiet but resolute. The room's temperature drops. Rebecca's arms tighten around herself. Harold's jaw twitches. Maggie shudders. For the first time since the night began, The silence is loud with the weight of truth. The Carter family is a pillar of their affluent suburban neighborhood, a legacy built on James Carter's formidable reputation as a retired judge. His unwavering discipline and stern moral compass have earned him admiration. But inside the walls of the Carter estate, the air is thick with tension. To outsiders, they are picture perfect, yet behind closed doors, fractures run deep. Beneath polished dinner parties and forced smiles, resentment festers, unspoken and unresolved. Maggie Carter stands in the kitchen, staring at the rain streaking down the window. The quiet hum of the dishwasher is the only sound. A schoolteacher by trade, she has mastered the art of patience and warmth. But nothing has ever filled the void left by the death of her child. Years have passed, yet the grief lingers in subtle ways. The way she reaches for a hand that isn't there. The way she hesitates before entering a toy aisle at the store. She cares for others with a desperate intensity, as if trying to atone for something she never speaks of. The front door creaks open, and Lisa Carter steps inside, carrying Lily in her arms. She looks thinner than before, her eyes darting around as if expecting someone to leap from the shadows. James watches from the foot of the staircase, his expression unreadable. "You just show up after all this time?" His voice is sharp, measured. Lisa tightens her grip on Lily. "I needed to come home." James exhales through his nose but says nothing. Lisa doesn't explain further, doesn't speak of where she's been or why she left so abruptly. The suitcase in her hand is small, her belongings minimal. It's clear she never planned to return. And yet, here she is. Nathan Carter watches the reunion from the edge of the living room, a cigarette smoldering between his fingers. He exhales slowly, the smoke curling around him like a ghost. Once the golden boy, Nathan fell hard and fast into addiction, spending years clawing his way back to sobriety. But in this house, redemption is never granted. "You clean now?" Lisa asks, shifting Lily on her hip. Nathan smirks, but there's no humor in it. "Define clean." James scoffs. "Don't expect a damn medal." The words sting, but Nathan hides it well. He's always been the Carter family's favorite disappointment. Lily giggles as she toddles across the living room, her tiny hands reaching for Maggie. The older woman catches her mid-step, holding her close. "You're just a little sunshine, aren't you?" Maggie coos, pressing a kiss to Lily's forehead. Lisa watches, tense. James barely acknowledges the child, his focus elsewhere, while Nathan leans against the wall, arms crossed. He studies Maggie, the way her eyes soften when she looks at Lily, the way she holds her a little too tightly. There's something unsettling about it, something too familiar. Late at night, Lisa double-checks the locks, her hands trembling. She keeps an old letter folded in her pocket, the edges worn from being read too many times. Maggie catches her in the hallway. "You okay?" Lisa forces a smile. "Fine. Just tired." Maggie doesn't buy it. "You don't have to be scared here." Lisa looks away. She wants to believe that, but Derek Fulton's shadow looms large even from a distance. She hasn't spoken his name, but she can feel him closing in. James sets his coffee cup down with a deliberate click, eyes locked on Lisa. "You come back here expecting what? Sympathy? A fresh start?" Lisa's jaw tightens. "Maybe just a little understanding. But I guess that's asking too much." James leans back, crossing his arms. "You made your bed. Now lie in it." Maggie clears her throat. "Dad, that's enough." James turns to her, expression hard. "Stay out of this. You always do." Lisa laughs, bitter. "Oh, but Maggie's always the exception, right?" She screws up, and you pat her on the head. "But me? You never let me forget?" Nathan drains his beer, watching the family implode from the sidelines. "Funny," he mutters. "I've been the family failure for years, but Lisa comes back, and suddenly I'm not the biggest disappointment anymore." Maggie sighs. "That's not fair." Nathan scoffs. "Isn't it? You're the golden one, Mags. Always have been. You don't get it because you've never been on the outside looking in." Maggie looks away, guilt flickering across her face. Lisa shifts uncomfortably, while James remains unmoved. Nathan stands, stretching. Don't worry though. I know exactly where I stand in this family. Always have. His words hang in the air long after he leaves the room, a quiet reminder that the Carter family's cracks are no longer just beneath the surface. They are breaking wide open. Detectives Jameson and Ruiz step into the Carter household, their sharp eyes scanning the room. The air is thick with tension, the remnants of grief clinging to every corner. Jameson breaks the silence. We're going to ask some questions. I need you all to be honest with us. His voice is steady, authoritative. Lisa flinches. Maggie folds her arms tightly while Nathan shifts uncomfortably in his seat. James Carter, ever composed, simply nods. Who was the last person with Lily before she stopped breathing? Ruiz's gaze lingers on Lisa. Maggie answers first. I was with her before bed. She was fine. Her voice cracks slightly. And after that? Jameson presses. Lisa hesitates. I don't know. She was asleep. Ruiz leans forward. That's not what we heard. A chill creeps through the room. No one speaks. Detective Jameson reads the coroner's report again, his stomach tightening. His jaw clenches as he turns to Ruiz. This wasn't an accident. Ruiz exhales sharply. Suffocation. Someone held her down. Jameson flips through the pages. Bruises on her wrists, small faint fingerprints. His eyes darken. Whoever did this made sure she couldn't fight back. The weight of the revelation is suffocating. Someone in that house killed Lily. Maggie's mind races as she sits in her room, the events of the previous night replaying like a distorted film reel. Lisa had been restless, double-checking the windows, whispering under her breath, "Please, just one more night," Lisa had muttered. He doesn't know we're here. At the time, Maggie thought little of it. Now, the words feel different. Sinister. Lisa had been afraid. But of whom? A sudden thought grips Maggie. Lisa's room. She pushes open the door and begins searching. Her hands tremble as she pulls open a drawer, pushing aside clothes until she feels something hard beneath them. A diary. Flipping through the pages, Maggie's breath catches. The entries are erratic, written in hurried, panicked strokes. He's watching. I see him in the shadows. I have to leave. I have to keep Lily safe. And then, Lily isn't safe here. The words burn into Maggie's mind. A sick feeling crawls up her spine. Lisa wasn't just running. She was hiding. Nathan smokes outside, the cigarette trembling between his fingers. He hears the whispers inside the house, his name being said with doubt. He exhales. I didn't touch that kid. His voice is low, defensive. Jameson steps onto the porch. Then tell me what you were fighting about. Nathan grinds his teeth. Lisa was paranoid, kept saying someone was after her. I told her she was losing it. He pauses. Maybe I should have listened. Jameson studies him. You have a record, drugs, assault. People talk. Nathan laughs bitterly. People always talk. Doesn't mean they're right. But doubt clings to the air. Mrs. Donahue grips her teacup, eyes darting between the detectives. I heard a child crying that night. Late. It sounded desperate. Ruiz leans in. And then she hesitates. It stopped. Suddenly. I thought maybe she had just gone back to sleep. But now, I'm not sure. Jameson nods. Thank you. As they leave, Ruiz murmurs, that means Lily was alive past midnight. He looks grim, which means someone in that house knows exactly what happened. Lisa sits on the edge of the bed, hands gripping her arms. Maggie kneels in front of her. Lisa, I found your diary. Lisa's breath hitches. You were running. From who? Lisa stares past her, voice barely above a whisper. Derek. But not just him. Maggie frowns. What do you mean? Lisa's eyes flick to the doorway, to the shadow of their father lingering outside. She drops her voice lower. You don't understand. It's not just Derek I was running from. The room feels colder. Maggie's heart pounds. Maggie storms into the den, hands shaking. "What did you do?" James sets his glass down, gaze cold. "Careful, Margaret. You never wanted Lisa back here. You never even looked at Lily. What are you hiding?" James stands slow and deliberate. "Let the past stay buried, Maggie." She recoils, but something about his tone chills her more than the words themselves, because for the first time, she wonders, had Lisa been running from their father? A memory claws its way to the surface. Maggie is 6, standing outside James's study, the heavy wooden door always locked. A loud voice inside, then a cry. Nathan once tried to open it. Their father's fury had been immediate. Maggie shivers. Why had they never questioned it? Heart pounding, she moves down the hall, hand hovering over the door handle. The truth has been here all along. She just never dared to look. Maggie's fingers tremble as she fits the key into the lock. It resists at first, as if the door itself wants to keep its secrets buried. With a sharp push, it gives way, revealing a room frozen in time. Dust clings to the heavy bookshelves, the air thick with the scent of old paper and something stale, like the remnants of a past, best left undisturbed. She scans the room, her pulse pounding. James never allowed them in here. What was he hiding? Her hands move instinctively, yanking open drawers, flipping through files. Old court documents, case notes, faded photographs. But beneath the official paperwork lies something unexpected, a bundle of letters tied with a frayed ribbon. She unties them with careful fingers, dread curling in her stomach. And then she sees it. One envelope, addressed in her mother's handwriting. The ink smudged as if someone had held it in shaking hands. She swallows hard and pulls out the letter. Maggie reads the first few lines, her breath catching in her throat. The words hit like a punch to the ribs. "James, I should have told you the truth years ago. Lisa is not yours." She staggers backward, gripping the letter like it might slip from her hands and erase what she just read. Lisa? Not James's daughter? That explains everything. The disdain, the resentment, the way he treated her like an outsider. He had known. He had known all along. Memories flood back, Lisa's punishments always harsher, his cold, almost cruel indifference. It wasn't just favoritism. It was something darker, something that had festered for decades. Maggie forces herself to keep reading. "I was afraid. I know what you're capable of, James, but she's innocent. Please. Whatever you do, don't punish her for my mistakes." A chill grips Maggie's spine. Her mother had been afraid of him. Her mother, who had always seemed so strong, had feared the man she married. Maggie's hands shake as she shuffles through more papers, her mind racing. She knows there's more. The truth isn't just in these words. It's buried somewhere deeper in this room. Her eyes catch on a bookshelf, slightly ajar, a subtle gap between the wood and the wall. She reaches for it, fingers curling around the edge. With a firm pull, it swings open, revealing a small metal safe. Her heart pounds. James never let anyone near his study, let alone this safe. She frantically searches for anything, a code, a clue. Then, in an old leather-bound ledger, she spots a series of numbers scrawled on the inside cover. She punches them in, her hands slick with sweat. The safe clicks open. Inside, she finds something small but heavy, a USB drive. Her stomach knots. Whatever is on this drive, it was important enough for James to hide it. She grabs her laptop, plugs it in, and waits as the files load. The screen flickers to life. And then she sees it. Grainy video footage, a dimly lit room, a girl, Lisa, young, vulnerable, her small frame curled inward, and then James. Maggie's breath catches in her throat. The way he looms over Lisa, the way she flinches, it's undeniable. The sound is low, but she can hear it. His voice firm, controlling. Lisa's whimpering, barely above a whisper. Maggie's hands clench into fists. This is why Lisa had been so afraid. This is what she had been running from. Tears blur her vision, rage burning beneath her ribs. She has to get out. She has to show this to someone. But as she yanks the USB from her laptop, she hears footsteps. James. Meanwhile, Detective Ruiz studies the footage from a neighbor's security camera. The timestamp is clear. Nathan stumbling home, hours before Lily's death. His alibi had been weak, but now it's ironclad. Ruiz exhales sharply. Nathan isn't their guy. But that means his jaw tightens. There's only one other person with the means, the opportunity, and the history. James Carter. James stops in the doorway of his study, eyes narrowing. Maggie clutches the USB in her fist, her face pale, chest rising and falling in short, rapid breaths. "You've been busy," he says, voice dangerously low. Maggie swallows hard. "You don't get to do this anymore." James's expression remains unreadable. But there's something in his eyes. A flicker of something dark. "You don't know what you're talking about. I know everything." Her voice is hoarse but steady. "Lisa isn't your daughter. You knew, and you made her life hell because of it." She lifts the USB. "And this proves it." For the first time, James's mask slips. "Put that down, Maggie." She shakes her head. "You killed Lily." His eyes flash. "Lisa never should have come back here." Maggie's stomach turns. "She was running from you." James takes a slow step toward her. "I did what I had to do." Her fingers tighten around her phone. And then she dials. Lisa stands frozen in the living room, watching as James stalks toward her. His voice is calm, but the threat is unmistakable. "If you tell them anything," he murmurs, "Lily won't be the only one." Lisa's breath hitches. He wouldn't. Would he? Maggie steps between them. "It's over." She lifts her phone. "They're on their way." James sneers. "You think they'll believe you? You think a few files and an old video will hold up in court?" But Maggie sees the flicker of fear beneath his anger. He knows he's lost. Then, the distant wail of sirens. James exhales sharply, his shoulders tensing. For the first time in his life, he has no control. Lisa breaks. Her voice trembles as she speaks. "I saw him." Maggie turns sharply. "What?" Lisa's hands shake. "That night, I heard Lily crying. I got up, but I froze. I saw him go into her room." And then the crying stopped. Tears spill down Lisa's face. "I did nothing." Her voice cracks. "I was too scared to move." Maggie grips her hand. "It wasn't your fault." Lisa sobs. And outside, the sirens grow louder. James Carter will never hurt them again. James Carter emerges from the house, wrists bound behind his back. The red and blue strobes of the police cruisers paint his face in shifting shadows, but his expression remains eerily blank. No struggle. No resistance. Just that same cold detachment he had carried for years. Maggie stands near the porch, arms crossed over her chest, her pulse hammering. She wants to see fear in his eyes, wants to witness some acknowledgement of what he's done. Instead, he turns his head slightly, fixing his gaze on her. "You've always been a disappointment." His voice is even, almost casual, as if they were discussing a failed school test, not the destruction of an entire family. Maggie's breath catches. Rage coils in her chest, but before she can respond, the officers shove him toward the patrol car. The door slams shut. Lisa stands frozen beside her, eyes locked on the scene. The past is being driven away in the back of that cruiser, yet it still clings to her, refusing to let go. The second the car disappears down the street, Lisa's body folds in on itself. A broken sob rips from her throat as her legs buckle. Maggie lunges forward, catching her just before she hits the ground. "It's over," Maggie whispers, holding her tight. "He's gone." Lisa shakes violently, fingers digging into Maggie's jacket as if letting go would send her spiraling into oblivion. Years of fear, buried beneath forced smiles and quiet obedience, now erupt in uncontrollable waves. Maggie rocks her gently, pressing her cheek against Lisa's hair. She doesn't say it will be okay, because she doesn't know if it ever will be. A few officers linger nearby, speaking in hushed tones. One of them approaches, voice soft. She should see someone. Trauma like this. I know. Maggie swallows the lump in her throat. I'll make sure she does. But even as she says it, she wonders, how do you heal from something like this? By morning, James Carter is a headliner. Respected judge arrested in child abuse scandal. The fall of James Carter, secrets buried behind the bench. A father's betrayal. The chilling crimes of Judge Carter. Neighbors whisper behind closed doors. His colleagues issue carefully crafted statements of shock and condemnation. The same people who once called him an honorable man now distance themselves, erasing connections, rewriting history. Maggie walks through town, feeling the weight of every glance, every muttered conversation. She hears her name spoken in the aisles of the grocery store, sees heads turn when she passes. She's the one who found out. How could they have not known? Poor girls. What they must have been through. It isn't sympathy that lingers in the air. It's the uneasy realization that a monster lived among them, hiding behind courtrooms and polished shoes. She stops in front of the newspaper stand, staring at her father's face on the front page. The caption reads, "A house of lies." And for the first time in her life, she doesn't feel like his daughter. Nathan tosses the last duffel bag into the trunk. The weight of it, nothing compared to the burden he's carried for years. Maggie stands a few feet away, arms crossed. You don't have to leave. His lips twitch into something resembling a smirk, but there's no humor behind it. Yeah, I do. She exhales slowly. You didn't do anything wrong. Nathan's gaze flickers with something unreadable. Maybe. But staying here, it'd be like wearing his name around my neck for the rest of my life. I need a fresh start. Maggie nods, even though part of her wants to argue. He was her brother, not by blood, but by survival. And now, just when the truth is out, he's slipping away. Nathan steps closer, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture is fleeting, intimate in its quiet simplicity. You take care of yourself, Mags. Her throat tightens. You too. He hesitates, just for a second, then presses a quick kiss to her forehead before sliding into the driver's seat. The engine rumbles to life. Maggie watches as he pulls onto the road, disappearing into the horizon. The therapist's office smells like lavender and old books. Lisa sits stiffly on the couch, fingers twisted in her lap. She hates this room. Hates the quiet expectation in the therapist's gaze. How are you sleeping? The woman asks. Lisa stares at the framed degrees on the wall. I don't. She doesn't mention the nightmares, the way James's voice still slithers into her mind when the house goes quiet. She doesn't talk about the panic attacks that leave her gasping for air in the middle of the night. The therapist studies her. Healing takes time. Lisa lets out a humorless laugh. Healing assumes there's anything left to fix. Silence stretches between them. Eventually, the therapist leans forward. You survived. Lisa blinks at that. Such a simple statement. But the way it's said, like it's an achievement, not just an unfortunate truth, makes something tighten in her chest. For the first time, she wonders if survival is enough. To the world, Maggie is a hero. The woman who stood up against her own father. The sister who uncovered the truth. But in the silence of her apartment, she drowns in guilt. How did she not see it? The bruises Lisa never explained, the fear in her eyes, the way she shrank whenever James entered the room. It had been right there. She grips a mug of coffee, staring at the headlines scattered across her table. Justice served. A family's nightmare exposed. Justice. She doesn't know if that's what this is. James is behind bars, but the damage he left behind lingers. Her phone buzzes. Lisa, thank you. 2 words. Maggie exhales shakily, running a hand through her hair. Maybe she wasn't a hero. Maybe she had missed the warning signs, but she did something now. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. For tonight. Maggie stares at her own reflection in the window, but the woman staring back is someone she barely recognizes. There's no relief in knowing the truth, only a gnawing horror, one that burrows deep, settling in places she never knew existed. Evil hadn't come from the outside, it had lived here, in their home, woven into the fabric of their lives. James Carter had been the monster hiding in plain sight. But how many others existed behind closed doors, their crimes rotting beneath layers of forced smiles and holiday photos? She presses her palms to her temples, squeezing her eyes shut. How had no one seen? How had she not seen? A chill creeps down her spine. It isn't just James. It's the silence that let him thrive, the polite ignorance of a world that looks away when things don't seem quite right. Maggie swallows hard, forcing herself to look again. The woman in the window still looks broken, but there's something else now. A sharpness in her eyes. A quiet fury. Because silence is just as dangerous as the crime itself. And she refuses to be a part of that silence ever again. Lisa had been suffering for years. Years. And no one had noticed. Maggie flips through the old files from James's study, her breath catching as she rereads the hospital records, the disciplinary notes from Lisa's school. The red flags had been everywhere. Bruises dismissed as clumsiness, absences explained away with fake doctor's notes. No one had questioned the fear in her eyes, the way she shrank at sudden noises. Society turns away from the uncomfortable. It's easier to believe that abuse happens in dark alleyways, in places far removed from suburban lawns and well-manicured homes. But it doesn't. It festers inside those walls. Maggie clenches her fists. How many other Lilies are out there, trapped in a home they can't escape? How many more will be lost because the world refuses to see? She shoves the files aside. It isn't just about James anymore. It's about every ignored warning, every whispered excuse, every person who looks the other way. She refuses to be one of them. The earth is still fresh. Too fresh. Maggie kneels beside Lily's grave, fingers tightening around the worn, stuffed bunny in her hands. It had been the child's favorite, dragged through dirt and bathwater, clutched during thunderstorms. She places it gently against the headstone. "I'm sorry," she whispers, her voice breaking. "I should have protected you." The words feel hollow. What good are apologies to the dead? She inhales sharply, wiping at her damp cheeks. This can't be where it ends, not with a gravestone and empty regrets. She presses her palm to the cold marble. "I swear, I won't let it happen again." A breeze stirs the trees, rustling through the cemetery, sending a soft shiver down her spine. And then, so faint she almost convinces herself she imagined it, there's a sound. A giggle. Light. Childlike. Maggie's breath catches. She turns sharply, scanning the quiet cemetery. Nothing. Just wind, stirring the leaves. A trick of her mind. Or maybe something more. She exhales, steadying herself. Whatever it was, she takes it as a sign. It's time to start fighting for the ones who still have a chance.